Welcome back to the 7th grade Mustache. On today's episode, we'll be speaking about the history of real estate, of land, and black ownership, and the trials and tribulation of black folk and owning land and keeping land in the United States of America. At 12 noon on April 22nd, 1889, the Oklahoma land rush of 1889 had begun. It was the first land run into the unassigned lands. The unassigned lands is another way of saying land stolen from Native Americans, from the red man. So they pushed the Native Americans off this land to make it available to white people. The 1890 territorial census of Oklahoma listed roughly 3,000 black residents. Of that number, only 42 were recorded as having entered the territory to file a claim. It was later found that these numbers had been altered to prevent whites from being intimidated by the idea of droves of free Negroes heading in their direction in search of land. Total estimates of those who participated in the land run range anywhere from 50,000 to 100,000. So obviously, those numbers had been modified. People that were coming into the land in search of property, they were called boomers, and it was a name given to describe the land run participants. Sooners were those who illegally entered before the official land opening. Oklahoma Sooners. Just keep that in mind.
That's what the football team says. Boomer Sooners. They're telling you about their history.
All right. So check this out. The flood of black migration into Oklahoma territory after 1889, after the land run, is indisputable. The history of black folks in that area is legendary. Tulsa, the HBCUs. But it began before that land run, though. And there was a black woman named Lizzie Robinson of Memphis, Tennessee. She remembered coming to Oklahoma in 1889 aboard a train full of black people. All of them secured claims in Blaine, Canadian, and Kingfisher counties. She recalls in a Depression-era interview that most of them built dugouts and had small log houses to live in. They lived hard. White intimidation most likely factored into the low success rate of black boomers in 1889. By the land run of 1891, blacks were prepared to deal with such dirty tactics. On the eve of September 22nd, 1891, an advocate of black settlement led an armed demonstration into a white camp outside the black hub of Langston, Oklahoma.
I'm familiar with that place.
Some 30 Negroes, all armed with Winchester rifles, descended upon the camp, taking it by surprise, and issued their orders, which were to the effect that these lands belonged to the Negroes, and they proposed to hold them at all hazards by any means necessary. As these orders were given out at the muzzles of loaded rifles, the cowboys assembled did not pose any further threat.
They didn't want no smoke.
They didn't want the smoke. So, there you go.
Look, we've talked at length ad nauseum about two things. One, black folks were already there. Two, we are the native people. And three, when it comes to land, you had to defend your land. I actually attended Langston University, which is a black land grant college in Oklahoma. The other thing that my brother ain't brought up yet, he was real nice, is the oil. There's two
now,
movements.
Hold on. We did talk about that in a previous episode.
Yeah, in previous episodes, excuse me. But there's two movements you must understand. One, the Trail of Tears, which forced Native Americans. The whole theme of this episode is redlining, which is something that started when it came to, we still see it now. If you have a certain zip code and you put your zip code in, all of a sudden your insurance goes up, or all of a sudden your property value goes down. Well, that is unsanctioned. That's sanctioned racism that's no longer accepted.
Right.
But now you have greenlining, where this is acceptable racism. This is gentrification. You got black folks who've owned this land for over hundreds of years.
That's right.
That all of a sudden, it's been devalued. Nobody wants to live there. You're garbage, and then they want to buy your land cheap. Then it becomes fashionable to live there.
All right, check this out. Just hold on. Check it out. Let's set up the groundwork in the history first, because before there were these urban neighborhoods, there were farmlands, and there were black farmlands and black oil fields, and black people who had mineral rights. So let's get into that because that's something that's not discussed enough. All right, hold on a second. So let's dial it back for a second because we got to get into why the farm part of this conversation is so important. All right, so okay, during the early part of the 20th century, the federal government began to seize lands that belonged to black farmer. Excuse me. Let me start that again. So during the 20th century, black people in the U.S. were dispossessed of 12 million acres of land, the size of Vermont and New Hampshire combined. Just think about that for a second.
What do they call that? Generational wealth.
Generational
wealth was taken from our people. And this is by the government. And it's for everything from seizing it for tax purposes, seizing it to give to somebody else, seizing it saying that you're Indian. See, it's funny how they'll consider you Indian then and take your land and give it to a white man. But you weren't Indian last week.
Okay. So look, this is what happened. They came in with enslaved Africans, took the areas along the East Coast. They slowly pushed all the Native Americans back until they got all the way out west and just killed them, most of them off. And, you had the ones that held out like the Comanche for the longest time, but most of them were killed off and pushed into these reservations. Once they finished doing that, this is all planned. Once they finished doing that, they made the way clear for white people to come in the great land grab of the quote-unquote unsettled lands.
Yes.
Now, then you have the enslaved Africans who are then freed with the end of the Civil War. They go west. You have black people going all the way to California, all into the Midwest. You have black people in Nebraska and South Dakota and Kansas. There were black people who were living in Nebraska and Kansas heard about the land grab in Oklahoma in 1899, came down on horseback.
Yes.
And started to, make claims down there. And as you can see, this racism that was left over from slavery was continuing through intimidation and legal laws or government laws that were written by racist people. So now here's the thing about the farmland. So these blacks that were in these territories like Oklahoma who had land found they had oil on the land. And many of them were smart enough to realize they needed to retain their mineral rights to control the wealth that's in that land. But then you had others who weren't so savvy and were manipulated and lost the rights to these minerals or these natural resources.
You got to understand I got three personal examples of people who have mineral rights. The first one, when I went to Langston, a lady that helped raise me, because the reason I went down there is because my aunt and uncle, they both graduated, but this is my aunt's mom. And what she did was she literally, when she sold the land to white folks, people never read the contracts. These people were surveying her land before they bought it. So they thought they were taking advantage of this woman. And what they did was they bought this land from her, but they never read the land contract. Her contracts always specifically said top 2 inches of topsoil. Even the white folks didn't know what that meant. What that means is that she kept her mineral rights. So she sold hundreds of acres of land to these white people that had oil on it. And the white people thought they had the rights to the land, and they would start pumping, and then she would give them a cease and desist notice. And like, oh no, you only own the top 2 inches of topsoil, Mr. White Man. And so he had to put the oil back in the ground, literally put the oil back in the ground. She was being paid by Kerr-McGee, which is a gas company, not to pump. Literally people who own oil rights get paid by gas companies because, we had an embargo and all this other stuff going on. So she literally would get $10,000 every so many months not to pump the oil. And then she would sell her, lend her oil rights to different, like Kerr-McGee or Sinclair. That's who owned Sinclair at the time. So that's one situation. The other one, there's some Native American people here who are black in Omaha. And I remember one of them used to go cash her. She would get a check from South Dakota. She had oil rights in South Dakota and gold rights. And so she would get this big old check and come down to like Dailies and cash her check. Literally. like a check for like 15, 20,000 every so many months, and she would have to cash it because she didn't have a bank account, and Daly would cash it for her. Another black woman I work with, again, she's Native American, but she looks black. She's like Blackfoot, whatever tribe she is out of South Dakota. She gets a check every so many years because they got oil rights up there in South Dakota, and they got mineral rights. I think it's, you always hear Black Hills Gold and stuff like that. Well, like I said, when you see these black folks and the nose looks different, a lot of those are Native American people. And the whole idea, like I said, we get that there were enslaved Africans, but a lot of these people were already here, and they use the African narrative. Oh, you're a slave, and it would kick you off your land, even though your family had been there the entire time. And going all the way to the East Coast, West Coast, pardon me. We keep hearing about this family in California that got their land back for that beach, a beach worth $72 million. That's because these people were there first. And it takes a little bit of paperwork and a little bit of doing, but it's legitimate that it's one thing when a mob of people runs you off. It's another thing when your government runs you off the land. That's some fucked up shit.
That's institutional racism.
See, it's one thing to have, be a bigot. It's one thing to be prejudiced. Hey, I don't like you because you're light skinned or dark skinned. That's one thing. But it's another thing when the government comes through and justifies it and sends police and sends court orders and all this other stuff and takes your land, then just hands it to somebody else.
It's called fascism also.
Fascism is complicated, but yes.
But here's the thing, though, and
because they buried it in the form of patriotism.
But here's the thing, though. We're going to tie it into fascism because fascism is the government and the corporations coming together to control resources and the people. But here's why: because after the Great Depression in the United States, the weak dollar caused the Wall Street investment groups to take interest in farmland.
Yeah,
and many of these farmlands were being usurped by the FDA and sold on the cheap to these Wall Street investors.
Wait, here's a problem. This is modern day stuff. It's one thing when you talk about the Great Depression. It's going on in modern day. What about those black farmers who sued?
Hang on. We're going to get to that. Just let me get there first. There's a lot of ground to cover, dude. Just settle down.
But I just want to make sure we're talking about the modern stuff too, because we laugh. Oh, that's 100 years ago. But there's stuff going on where they literally have screwed over modern day black folks. We're talking about stuff not even 20 years ago. 7, 8 years ago.
Okay.
Where it's still going on to this day.
So going back to the 12 million acres that were seized by the federal government, half of that loss, 6 million acres, occurred over just 2 decades, from 1950 to 1969, in a period of time largely associated with civil rights groups. So the threat of seizing lands was used to prevent blacks from voting and speaking out during the civil rights movements. And federal funds were given to local governments and boards, and blacks were prevented from joining those boards. So what's going on here is these citizen groups and these small government bodies are getting these government subsidies, and they're controlling farmlands and decisions about farmlands, and there are no black board members. There's no black people being allowed to vote on these things.
It's one thing when you don't participate. It's another thing when you're not allowed to participate.
Mm-hmm.
And it still goes on to this day. My grandfather had a bunch of land, and so I remember I saw this newscast about this brother that basically they were trying to take his land for a shopping mall. And his brother had served in World War II, and he was shooting at the police. He's like, nah. He said, I have no problem with manifest destiny. If you're building a street or a road, I fought for that. I understand that. But if you want to take my land, this is modern day. If you want to take my land for a shopping mall, y'all gonna die. And they never did anything to this man. He fought them off. Well, my grandfather went through something similar, and this is recent. He had a bunch of land, and so they started building housing developments around his land. So they said, look, Mr. Hobson, you need to upgrade that land or we're going to take your land. And he's like, nah, I'm not ready to do anything. They kept forcing him. So what he did was he built a little shitty house, literally from all kind of leftover parts he had, builds this little shitty house. And you got these $800,000 to $1 million houses all around him, but he has this plot of land. And so I said, grandfather, what are you trying to do? He said, that's easy. He said, when they buy that land from me, they're going to build me a couple houses and give them to me for free. So so they could not say that he didn't upgrade the land, because that's a big part of it. If you don't upgrade the land, they will take your land. him putting a house on there means he upgraded the land and they couldn't touch him. But those are the laws that this is modern day Tennessee. So these are the laws that we're talking about. Sometimes black folks don't realize you're not allowed to just sit on your own land. You must upgrade it. That's un-American. But yes, they will use those laws to take your land.
Mm-hmm. So this mass land grab or seizure by the government affected 98% of black agricultural landowners and is part of a pattern of institutional racism and discrimination that has been contributed to the racial wealth gap in the United States.
Yes, exactly.
Many of the driving forces behind this land theft were legal and originated in federal policies. You have to understand that. You also need to understand that many of these farmers that lost their land, it wasn't through foreclosure.
No, it wasn't through tax foreclosure. It wasn't because they didn't pay their bill. It's because they used these little, like I said, bigotry is one thing. These are racist laws that were designed to specifically affect people of color. And that's one of them is like not knowing the land ordinance, not knowing what you're supposed to do, what you can do, not knowing what you can put on that land. Mm-hmm. Or even zoning, even in modern day in the cities. Say you want to start a business in your own home and they decide that your home ain't zoned for that, they can take it.
Right. That's right. So farmland in the U.S. is already owned by somebody. Like when you drive around, you might be out in the country somewhere, or you're driving down the interstate and you see farmland for sale. All that stuff is owned. All of the available farmland in the United States has been taken up and surveyed and is owned by somebody. Now, here's the thing, though. But hold on. Wait.
Okay.
So the problem is that when this land goes up for sale, it's auctioned off. And some of these large chunks of land were taken from black farmers through government intimidation. And during the 70s and 80s farm crisis, many black farmers were offered half of the subsidies that white farmers received.
Yeah. Ooh. Like when we say subsidies, first things first.
Remember Farm Aid? Remember that shit in the 80s? The fucking bands was like playing for the farmers. How many black farmers you think got any of that fucking money?
Look. We're not talking about government cheese when we say subsidies. We're talking about the government. When the government wants to control a market, they'll buy your product at a certain price. So, for instance, if you get a bushel of sugar, you can buy sugar from China for 32 cents a bushel, but the government will set a price where we'll buy it from you $25 a bushel. That's how these farmers stay in business. So if you're a black farmer and you got a white farmer right here, you're selling your bushels of sugar. That white farmer, the government's buying it from him, but the government won't buy from the black farmer. Little shit like that. It's crazy.
Okay. So the farming industry is a volatile industry regarding investment because
slow down.
Wait. Hold on. Because you have things like climate change that are now affecting investment in farmland. So what's happening now is that you have these investment groups like the TIAA who have these benign names, which stands for the Teachers Insurance and Annuity. That just sounds so benign and harmless on the surface.
Isn't it TIAA, CREF or something like that? Okay. There's three things we need to talk about.
But hold on. I'll bring them up because they brought up a bunch of stolen black farmland in the Mississippi Delta.
Yes.
And this goes to the lawsuit that's related to these black farmers in the Mississippi Delta that sued the federal government,
yes,
the FDA in particular, for using intimidation tactics to take their land. For example, for decades, they were intimidated when they were buying new trucks and new tractors and any signs of progression.
This is modern day. Modern day. Yeah, we're not talking.
They were told, this is in the 80s. In the 90s, they were told, oh, you farming like white folks. You can't. These are words that were spoken. They said, you were farming like white folks. You got to farm like a black farmer. You can't farm like white folks. Remember, this is backwards ass Mississippi.
Hey, don't forget, there's another lawsuit with these black farmers who bought these seeds from, I don't know if they're from the government or what. Come to find out, these seeds were not good. Literally, these seeds would not germinate.
No, so you're talking about the Terminator Monsanto seeds. Yeah. Terminator Monsanto seeds are designed to not. It's like a feminized seed. It won't bear any more seed. So, it's like seedless watermelons.
They gave these seeds specifically to black farmers to kill their business. Now, hold on. One of the booming black businesses back in the day was insurance. Why was insurance so big? Is because as a farmer, most farmers would get insurance because say you got a bad crop, say it's a drought, you lose your crop, the insurance company will pay you. So those were two. So this is what you're not told. The two biggest businesses back in the day for black folks were farming and the insurance industry. Now, that's why when you hear these terms, the Farm Bureau or Farmers Insurance, that's because those insurance companies started by insuring farmers' crops. And of course, back to the redlining, if you were a black farmer and you were in your zip code was this, they wouldn't offer you life. What they would do is they give you shitty insurance, which is called custodial insurance, which is the bare minimum. Like for instance, say you wanted to get life insurance on your mom for like 200,000. No, they would give you burial insurance, which is considered custodial insurance. Little shit like that. These are the games they played. See, like again, we're not talking about prejudice. We're not talking about bigotry. We're talking about actual racism, where these policies were designed to steal your land and steal your ability to.
But here's the problem, though. The insurance company is the shiny suit reptilian. Okay, because here's the thing.
Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad.
But see, they are the arbiter for these land grabs that happen to these black farmers because they are
because they wouldn't pay the claim. Literally, when they would not pay the claim,
that's right.
That farmer. So you got to understand this is where it's
a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword. Like
this is where the fascism comes in.
And there's bad.
When you literally have a government entity, then you literally have
a company
coming together to take this shit. So it's a shitstorm. Now hold it. The one thing I wanted to argue with you about when you said volatile, you were talking about the things that. But remember, what outperforms gold? What investment outperforms gold? Continually, farmland. Farmland is a better investment than gold. And guess who owns most of the farmland? Because I know you know who owns most of the farmland in America. Bill Gates. Bill Gates, who the same guy pushing this vaccine. So if you pay attention, Bill Gates.
No, he doesn't own most of it. He owns a large amount. He doesn't own most of it.
Look at as of right now, he is the largest owner of farmland in America at this current time. It just happened about I want to say a month ago. Mm-hmm. It may, like I said, it changes like everything else, but that is just an investment to him. So when you realize that he's investing in farmland for a couple one. I don't want the guy who said that the world is too populated to touch my farmland. You understand? I don't need him putting no goddamn sterilization shit in my corn where my dick won't work, number one. Number two, the guy only does investments. So even when you hear his name associated with this damn vaccine, he cares more about money than he cares about results. The deepest thing that you ever said to me was he uses this upgrade policy on all his shit.
Everything.
So this upgrade business model where you get Windows and you got to keep upgrading, and some of the upgrades are free and some of the upgrades aren't. And then Windows 9 comes out, which they never came out.
So you have GMO crops that have a vaccine built into it.
Yeah. So he uses this model on everything. So when it comes to this vaccine, which when we explain to you it's not a vaccine, you get pissed at us. You got to keep getting a shot every 6 months. Now, how come when you took your measles vaccine, you ain't got to get another one, but when you took this COVID vaccine, you got to keep getting it? That's a hustle. When it comes to this farmland.
All right, but hold up. Stop right there. Because we talked about chickenpox off the show and how back in the day, kids would have slumber parties and
literally
to spread chickenpox. And then, I got into a conversation with somebody out of the public, and he was like, well, the reason you don't see chickenpox nowadays is because of the vaccines. No, it's because of herd immunity.
Herd immunity does work. But like I said, they don't want to have the whole conversation. Here's what we're getting. Here's what we're trying to get
at. Come back to farming.
Yeah, the bottom line is that you got to follow the money. But also the bottom line is, who are they taking the money from? They took our land. And when they took your land, they literally take your ability to ever get out of the ghetto. And we're not talking about a physical ghetto in New York slums in Chicago.
Psychological.
We're talking about psychological ghetto. When they took that farmland from us, because farming, everybody got to eat. It's one of these markets that's not going to go anywhere. And you had black farmers who were providing a service. You had black farmers who were insured by insurance companies. You had black farmers trying to buy.
Also land. Had generational wealth.
Yes. You had wealth that could be passed down from kid to kid. Now, here's where we get into the greenlining. The greenlining is gentrification.
Wait, greenlining. Slow down. We're not there yet because we gotta talk about reparations. And reparations are directly connected to this conversation because it was the federal policies that took black farmland away. Therefore, the federal government should repay the wealth that was stolen.
When we talk reparations, you got all these white folks. You wasn't a slave. No, okay.
We talking about modern times now.
Yeah. First things first. Every slave owner was compensated. Do you understand that? Every slave owner was, except for one person that was not compensated, was the Cherokees, which the Cherokees owned slaves. If you look into the research, the reason that Cherokee land was taken is because they owned slaves. Lincoln, the edict that Lincoln issued was no white man will be punished for owning slaves. But anybody who wasn't a white man that owned a slave got their land taken. So that's why how Tennessee and Arkansas were taken from a lot of these Native Americans was because of that edict right there. Now, the other thing is, after the Civil War, what were you promised? 40 acres and a mule. Now, let me tell you, 40 acres and a mule doesn't sound like a lot. It's huge. But here's another thing. People don't even understand how bad they screwed you. Now, what is a mule? A mule's a hybrid. So that means you can't even breed that mule. All you can do is use that mule to till that land and possibly make a little bit of money. So what we're saying is that reparations were actually part of the deal. That's why they were giving you 40 acres and a mule. Everybody got paid for losing their slaves. Everybody made money on it. So how come the only people that don't make money on it are the black folks? But I digress. We're talking about modern times. You've had your land taken, and more of these people are proving it that these corporations and the government coerced, went together and took your land. And this is being proven. So that's why people are fighting to get their land back. But the bottom line with land is that that's generational wealth. That's some money that can be passed down. And you got to understand that your kids can live there. Your grandkids can live there. What's the biggest expense you got is your home. But if you got land that's already been paid for, that's already been through blood, sweat, and tears, through sweat equity, and my great grandfather had that land, I should be entitled to that. Instead, black folks fight over grandma's house, Nana's house for years. So that's one of the few things that is keeping us back. And that's racism. We're talking about racism. We're not talking about.
Listen, if you are a black person in this country and you have been here at least 5 to 6 generations, then you come from a farm.
Fucked.
No, you come from a farm. Listen, all these city-fied Negroes walking around here, they come from people on farms. Listen, Frank Lucas, Bumpy Johnson, those are all boys. Negroes. No, those are all Negroes from North Carolina. So
I thought Lucas was Mississippi boys.
Listen,
No.
Listen, man. Listen. The crazy part about New York, man, is that 80% of the black people from there, I'm not talking about the island people. I'm not talking about the green card Negroes. I'm talking about the black people that's American, that are born in America, that have, relatives in the South and in the West and in the Midwest. You come from a farm, man. Like all these people, like the crazy part, like the black gangsters in like history, they from the country. They not from New York City.
But see, okay, but that's where it gets complicated. Don't forget about Old Dirty Bastard. Don't forget about the Shittahcock tribes. Don't forget you had Native Americans there that was dark that's been there the whole time too. Mm-hmm. They some gangsters, motherfuckers. Don't forget about.
But you missing what I'm saying though.
Yeah.
Those are all country motherfuckers, man.
Yes, you 3 steps out the mud. I know what you're saying.
See, so this goes back to the point I'm making here. 5 to 6 generations back, your people were on farms.
We're farmers, period.
That means that the government owes you some money, straight up and down.
Here's where it's funny.
No, stop.
When
the reparation conversation wants to go back to slavery. You can avoid the whole slavery thing and just start with just the farm situation.
Yeah, thank you. See, okay, be careful, man. You're getting deep. That's what I'm saying.
That's the show, bro.
The whole idea that our people were wrong back then, and that's 3 or 4 generations ago. First things first, my aunt died about 7 years ago. She was 104. She saw slavery. You understand? She literally witnessed it. So with my aunt's passing, that's the last person I know. And she would tell us who in your family was a slave. And that's where it gets complicated because she also would tell you who wasn't a slave. And so that the whole slave narrative ain't what you think. But the whole idea that that's the only thing that's been done wrong to us is bullshit. We got modern day shit still going on. You still got people stealing your land. You still got people telling you that you owe taxes on some shit that you don't owe taxes on. That's a hustle. And when they take that land, who they give it to? And so when you find out these modern laws and you're unfamiliar with them, they use them to take land. And we're not like my brother said, we're not talking tax foreclosure. We're not talking like a brother was behind on his taxes. No, we're talking about, hey, well, you do realize that you're close to this power plant and that's dangerous. So we'll take your land just to protect you. That's that bullshit. That's that shit that people are doing. And when I say people, excuse me, the government is doing, corporations are doing, and or they make it so difficult for you to function where you can't make money. Now, how come everybody else in this country, their business is protected? Literally, they got government subsidies where they give businesses free land and they can operate on this land. That's the whole problem with this pipeline situation. That's the whole problem with these different natural park situations. And how come the white businesses are allowed to act with impunity, can do whatever they want, but a black business tries to gain traction and try to build itself up? Nah, it's going to get pissed on. Hey man, you need a certificate. Hey man, you need to get this. Hey man, you need to get that, and you'll never get all the things you need to actually ever prosper. That is racism. That is people affecting you all because you a nigga.
Okay, racial displacement, or gentrification, or the de facto segregation, originated in London during the early '60s. The term gentrification was used to describe the influx of a new gentry of wealthy people into low-income neighborhoods. It is the process of more affluent people and businesses moving into historically less affluent neighborhoods, while some urban neighborhoods or urban planning professionals say the effects of gentrification are purely beneficial. Others argue that it often results in harmful social consequences such as racial displacement or loss of cultural diversity. Two forms
Yes.
of residential racial displacement are often observed as manifesting in different ways. Direct displacement happens when the effect of gentrification leaves current residents unable to pay increasing housing costs, or when residents are driven out by government actions.
Yeah, the area gets better, you can't afford to live there.
Right. Or they're forced out by government actions like the forced sale by eminent domain to make way for a new, higher value development, like your grandfather was talking about with the fucking house. And he had to build that shitty little house just to prevent these motherfuckers from using eminent domain to take his shit.
Yeah, and that's the same thing that brother was telling you about who was in World War II. He said, I have no problem if it was eminent domain. If you're building a highway and that's going to help all Americans, he said, I have no problem with that. But if you're using eminent domain for a corporation to put a shopping mall on my property, you're going to catch some bullets. He said, I'm going to Second Amendment your ass.
Oh my God. Some existing housing may also become uninhabitable as the owners stop maintaining it while waiting for the best time to sell it for redevelopment.
I'm sorry.
Indirect residential racial displacement occurs when older housing units being vacated by low-income residents cannot be afforded by other low-income individuals. Indirect displacement can also occur due to government actions such as discriminatory exclusionary zoning laws that ban low-income residential development. Redlining.
Let's talk about
redlining though. Let's really get into it.
Let's talk about a modern day one. How about Caprini Greens? You remember back in the day, Chicago, Caprini Greens was the hardest ghetto up in that hardest hood, hardest housing project. And what did they do? They kicked all the residents out, did the scattered site housing, have them living everywhere, sell it to some wealthy white investor, and they start putting new houses and shit in. And you got people like, them houses, them redstones and all that kind of shit, whatever they call, sell for $1 million. Now, how could it be a housing project when niggas live there, but when white folks live there, the same place is selling for $1 million? How does that work? Because you sit here and you disenfranchise people. You got them poor, you got them on drugs, then you charging them rent. And then when you decide, okay, the property's not down enough, I buy it, put some new shit on there, and make millions and millions and millions of dollars.
So
it's fashionable to live there too. And people love to brag about living there too.
We're gonna get to Chicago in a minute. So we're gonna talk about the history of redlining and bring it current. So in 1917, 50 years after the end of slavery, local governments continued to legally enforce housing segregation through exclusionary zoning laws, city ordinances which prohibited the sale of property to black people. In 1917, when the Supreme Court ruled these zoning laws unconstitutional, homeowners swiftly replaced them with racially restrictive covenants, agreements between property owners that banned the sale of homes in a neighborhood to certain racial groups.
Neighborhood associations are
There you
racial.
go.
Yeah,
By,
neighborhood association was born in racism.
by the time the Supreme Court found racially restrictive covenants themselves unconstitutional in 1947, the practice was so widespread that these agreements were difficult to invalidate and almost impossible to reverse. According to the Unfair Housing document created by the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, 80% of neighborhoods in Chicago and Los Angeles carried racially restrictive covenants by 1940. Let's just stop with the esoteric, occult verbiage. Covenant, that's related to witchcraft. Okay.
You know what? Like, it's a different episode. But whenever somebody has a deep conversation, they never want to finish. You know, when you put a word together, it's called spelling. What's it called when you do magic? Casting a spell.
Yeah.
People don't realize that all these words go together. But hey, let's finish this. That's a different conversation, different episode.
Yeah, we'll come back to that one. So, okay, but here's the thing, though. The federal government was not involved in housing until 1934 because that's when they created the FHA, the Federal Housing Administration. And that was created as part of the New Deal. See, because the FHA sought to restore the local housing market after the Great Depression. And so they wanted to bolster the economy by incentivizing home ownership and introducing the mortgage lending system that we still use today. So instead of creating policies to make housing equal for all people, however, the FHA did the opposite. And so in doing this, it took advantage of racially restrictive covenants and insisted that the properties they insured use them. So along with a homeowners loan coalition, the HOLC, a federally funded program that was created to help homeowners refinance their mortgages, the FHA introduced redlining policies in over 200 American cities. I'm going to say that again for clarity and for emphasis. So the FHA introduced redlining policies in 200 American cities. Yeah. Beginning in 1934.
Look, so what we're saying is America was designed from its inception to get rid of the brown and black people on this and give it to white Americans. But the thing is, when you talk about the stuff in history, you're like, oh, that's 100 years ago. This is the 1930s. This is a few decades back. And these practices are hard to break because they're so entrenched that there's so many layers of bureaucracy over them that when you get down to it, it's not by accident. They want to make sure that these white people have a place to go where they feel safe and happy, and they don't want to look at your black ass. And they will take your land and give it to them, repurpose it to them. They'll help them start a business on it. They'll help them run a farm. But if you try the same activity, they'll arrest your ass and take your land.
Let's talk about residential security maps. In 1934, the Homeowners Loan Coalition included in the FHA underwriting handbook these residential security maps, and they were used to help the government decide which neighborhoods would make secure investments and which ones would be off limits for issuing mortgages. These maps were color-coded according to guidelines. And so you had the green area, or the green zone, which was represented in-demand and up-and-coming neighborhoods where professional men lived. These neighborhoods were explicitly homogeneous, lacking a single foreigner or Negro. The blue area were still desirable. These neighborhoods had reached their peak but were thought to be stable due to the low risk of infiltration by non-white groups. The yellow area is definitely declining. Mostly yellow areas bordered black neighborhoods. They were considered risky due to their threat of infiltration of foreign-born, Negro or lower grade populations. Boy, that's some eugenics right there. If y'all ass can't read between lines, that's fucking eugenics. Listen,
What they're
man.
telling you is a color coded map based on your race, ethnicity, and everything else. Who's desirable, who's not, and
Get
this
out there,
map
undesirables.
and this map tells you where you should live as a white man, white woman.
Reservation without walls. It's a concentration camp without walls. It's a reservation for everybody that's not red. So check this out. So the red area, the red line around these areas, were neighborhoods where infiltration had already occurred. These neighborhoods, almost all of them populated by black residents, were described by the HOLC as having an undesirable population and were ineligible for FHA backing.
So what they're telling you is they will not give you an FHA loan if you live in these areas, and so that defeats the whole purpose, right? That's racism. They're controlling where you live by giving you money or giving you enough money or not enough money. The reason racism is so amazing is because the idea that just a few old people die off and racism will stop. That's all bullshit, because racism is a growing, manipulating, it's changing. It's very subtle. It's very nuanced. And as soon as you, like, hey, that's racist. Okay, then we'll make it so it's not racist. And we create a new way of doing it. And so, like I said, I don't care about prejudice and bigotry. I don't care about you not liking me because I'm a nigga. I care about you fucking with my progress because I'm a nigga. That's what this is. They create these laws and these little things, and they pop up, and you don't even realize they exist. You don't even know. There's no racism handbook, my nigga. You understand? Here's how media gets black folks. The talk. Have you had a talk with your son about the police? Fuck that. Have you had your talk with your son about the banking system? That's what the fuck that's what you need to be talking to your fucking sons and daughters about, because this shit right here. Oh, and then you got Fannie Mac and Freddie Mae and all these government entities that give money so you can get a house, and you worried about buying a car. That's the talk you need to be having with you. Look, I get the police are racist. They might beat you up, but the shit that's going to fuck you for the rest of your life is living in the wrong neighborhood. Is living in the wrong, and then suppose that your family has owned this land for years and they devalue the land. Now you got to get rid of it because you can't survive. That's racism, man. Fuck hitting me with a goddamn billy club, my nigga. Hit me with some dollar bills. And I'm sorry,
all right,
but that's how the media gets you. Where right now we got all this George Floyd shit and Black Lives Matter, and you're like, Black Lives Matter. What about black homes? What about black happiness? What about black safety? You know. And so that's what
black
they get.
Excellence.
Man, my dude.
So
and the whole thing is when somebody all of a sudden greenlining is basically is acceptable selling out. So you got to be careful about that shit too, because whenever a black athlete speaks up, with like LeBron was like speaking up, they're like, oh, white people just dribble the ball, nigger. That's what they're saying. You know what I'm saying? So, but then when you got somebody who's doing some things, and okay, he's this, but then at the same time, you got the exact same person like Jay-Z. He's like, hey, me being here is helping black folks. Yeah. So,
okay.
but you was in the NFL talking about why are we kneeling? It's a hustle. Selling out is not okay, but you have to understand what the rules are, and that they're taunting you with a little cookie, with a carrot, when there's a whole smorgasbord and buffet behind that shit. And so, yeah, okay. Like I said, they get you with that media shit.
Yo, so redlining and racial displacement is de facto segregation. And indirect residential displacement occurs when older housing units being vacated by low-income residents cannot be afforded by their low-income individuals. But this is the thing, though. So there's things that there's fallout from this. There's things that affect it in different ways. For example, so residential racial displacement resulting from gentrification is also considered a form of it's considered a form of de facto segregation, or separation of groups of people caused by circumstances rather than by law, such as the Jim Crow laws enacted to maintain racial segregation in the South during post-Civil War Reconstruction era. But another side effect of this redlining is something called blockbusting. And blockbusting dates back to the early 1900s and it reached its peak in the years after World War II. And it is a long history of this happening in Chicago. And still, one of the nation's most segregated cities is Chicago. Violence was used to keep neighborhoods of Inglewood in Chicago white, but it didn't work. Instead, real estate brokers urged whites there to put their homes on the market for a number of years before 1962. This tactic caused demographic shifts in 2 to 3 blocks in Chicago on average. According to a report that examined 33 parcels in Chicago, real estate speculators earned an average premium of 73% for block busting. And so the other problem with this is that the block busting that unfolded in those areas, there's an example of it. There was a bungalow owner sold a home to a black family, and immediately afterward, property speculators who owned 3 nearby properties sold them to black families. The remaining white families sold their homes at a considerable loss. Before long, all the white residents left the neighborhood. But here's the thing. What they don't talk about is the fact that when the black people were sold these homes, they were sold them at inflated prices. Even though they knew that the white people were going to move out the neighborhood, they jacked the prices up even higher than what they would charge a white family. So there's this practice all throughout America of real estate companies selling homes to black families at inflated prices just to try and intimidate them on a financial level. So again, even with block busting, this still continues. So what I have noticed firsthand in Atlanta is that I was living in this neighborhood called Edgewood. And in Edgewood, it was a black neighborhood for a while, probably for about 50 years. And it was that way because white people had moved out to the cities during the civil rights era, during what they call the white flight. The white flight happened in a lot of different cities, but it happened during the civil rights era in a lot of cities because these racist, prejudiced white people started to move away when they saw all these black people with jobs and education moving into their neighborhoods. And so I saw when I moved into this neighborhood, parts of it had fallen into decline because of the lack of generational wealth. Mm-hmm. And people think, people like to think with this pull yourself up by the bootstraps mentality that, oh, well, if you want to excel, you can excel. Okay, that's cool, man. But there's a reason why this neighborhood is in decline. There's a reason why there's no generational wealth. There's a lot of crack cocaine in this neighborhood also. And I started to see white people from the suburbs like Marietta and Kennesaw and Douglasville moving into this neighborhood. And they will move into this neighborhood and they will not speak to anybody. And they would isolate themselves. And what I noticed, when white people would move onto the block, there would be more police patrols in that area. But the black neighborhoods did not have an increase in police patrols. But hang on. This is what pissed me off to the nth degree. When I saw them shut down a junior high school, it was a black junior high school. It was damn near all black. They shut it down through zoning. They had the entire area rezoned so they could get rid of schools. Every morning I would get up and I would go to work. And I would see this army of little black kids marching up the street to the elementary school up at the corner. And it was beautiful. There was grandmothers and mothers and dads walking with their kids, dropping the kids off at school. I saw this every day on my way to work. And so what I started to notice is that it began to trickle down, or the foot traffic started to die down. And I asked about this, and I was told that the white people that moved into the neighborhood went to City Hall and had the area rezoned. So what the black parents did over the summer is that they had the school changed into a charter school. So they could not remove the school from the area. So those parents fought back. They fought back on the playing field that their nemesis was using to suppress them. So these parents are smart enough to realize that, listen, you ain't gonna get rid of us. This is our neighborhood. We got 3-4 generations in this neighborhood. We staying here, and our kids gonna grow up here, and they're gonna graduate from this school. They're gonna attend this school and go on to remain educated and be, successful people. But they knew that they had to play the game to survive the game.
Look, the issue. I remember your dad told us a similar story when we were kids about Tech High School. And Tech High School was a black high school in Omaha. It was a black high school in Omaha, and all the old heads that live in Omaha that are in government, all this, they all went to Tech, and they're from Omaha. Excuse me. And so there was a big deal. Tech was literally graduating too many people, and there was white folks graduating from there also. And so there was the exclusive school was Central. And Central, your father was like, yeah, the Jews ran that school. And when they said, well, Central's not graduating enough people, we're going to shut it down, they came up with their own money and kept that school going. It's no different from what these black folks just did. When they said they're going to shut our school down, okay, we'll make it a charter school and we'll put our own money into it. I'm not disrespecting Jewish people. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that those people, they organized. They took it into their own hands to protect their community.
Right.
Yeah. And so what we're saying is that black folks need to take it into their own hands. But how do you take it into your own hands when people have stolen your land? How do you take it into your own hands when all these obstacles were put in your way?
Well, so that black elementary school is a perfect example of them taking it into their own hands and having it changed into a charter school. That's one example.
Also, now back to what you said about pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. That will always.
That's good when you got boots, but if you ain't got no fucking boots, I ain't got no sandals either, man.
Yeah, I ain't got shit but toenails. What I'm saying is that what nobody wants to understand, that's one of the biggest things that divides the black community, is that I had this talk with somebody because I'm a union leader, and so I'm saying, what happens when all the good people we got all become managers? And they're like, oh, this is like, no, it's just like the black community. If all the good black people move away, then we ain't got no community. If all the good qualified people leave, then you're killing it. That's the same thing that happened in Africa. The same thing. If slavery happened the way you said it did. So can you imagine going into a society, taking out all the doctors, all the lawyers, all the intelligent people, all the engineers? Why do you think Africa's in decline?
It's called a brain drain.
Yes, there's a brain drain, but don't forget the money drain too, because they want your minerals. What I'm trying to tell people is that this shit is not by accident. Now, the biggest thing that hurts the black community is that the successful black people always act like their success was individual. See, when Clarence Thomas said he never got anything from affirmative action. So you got a black man on the Supreme Court said he never got anything from affirmative action, but then you find out all these programs he was in as a kid that were affirmative action based. So see, do you see how? So I'm a successful black person, and you can be successful if you're a black person too. But then all of a sudden you act like I got there on my own. I didn't step on the backs of my ancestors. I didn't climb that ladder. I just appeared. I levitated, motherfucker. No, that's bullshit. So that's the problem. So when you talk about the Jay-Z's and all these people, and I'm here, but you can get here too, but you're not good enough. No, it's not that. It's that because some people actually have physical obstacles placed in front of them. And don't get me wrong. How about this? How about whenever people talk about prisons, they look at you. Like, you ever have a conversation at work like, how do you feel about the death penalty? What the fuck? I don't give a fuck. I'm not going to jail. I ain't got no. I've never been to jail. What the fuck y'all asking me for? Like, I'm an authority on criminal activity. Fuck you, white boy. What I'm saying is that nobody wants to admit that your black success was because of other black people. But then again, you don't have to sell out to be successful. You can work your way up, be successful, pay your dues, and acknowledge those people, and then you pull somebody with you. You've known me for years. I'm always getting people jobs where I work. I got one of the homeboys a job where I work. He fucked it off. I got my cousin hired. He fucked it off. But what I'm saying is I've always tried to share my success and not rub it in somebody's face and say, hey, I'm better than you. Look at me. No, stop rubbing people's face in your success and bring them along with you. Give them the tools. Create your own conglomerate. Create your own society. That's what made Tulsa so bad. Tulsa was one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in America, and then the race riot was over and they bombed it. That's racism. The white folks were jealous of your success, so they bombed your shit. How about when they bombed Philadelphia? And we're talking about modern times. We're talking about 65 or 68 when the cops came through with helicopters and bombed Philadelphia because of black folks. You must understand that we're not.
But see, the first domestic attack of terrorism on the
Was
black population was in Tulsa. So
no, the first bombing from a plane was in Tulsa. How about that?
Yeah,
that was before World War One, I think. So yeah, you got to understand that
that was after.
What? Oh well, they said it was the first bomb dropped from a plane. So
in America, though.
Look, the bottom line is that those obstacles placed in front of your success were not by accident. The idea that you got to go back to slavery to pay reparations or restitution is bullshit. When you realize how many of these companies were given money for restitution, that don't make sense. But my black people can't be given a few free scholarships or a few free properties, because if you do that, then you don't have a working class. You don't have for capitalism to work. You got to have poor people. And if you ain't got no poor people, capitalism ain't gonna work. So what happens when you're dubbed the poor class? What's happened when you're said you're a minority? Man, that is a intentional loser, motherfucker. You are designed. Everything is designed to make you a loser. And then if you have a success story, then you're the only one that can. The rest of these niggas ain't as lazy. That's a fucked up narrative. Man, fuck that shit, dude. That's not true.
So, real quick, I want to talk about how this is not only happening in the United States. It's happening in Latin America, in Brazil, where there's large black population. This is also happening in Africa, all over, in South Africa especially. But in Brazil and throughout the African diaspora, black women, especially poor black women, are rarely considered leaders of social movements, let alone political theorists, because in Salvador Bahia, Brazil, which has a huge black population, it's the women who determine how the urban policies are established. So the control over neighborhoods and gentrification and areas that are black neighborhoods are undergoing the same problems as black people here in the United States. But over there in Brazil, it's the black women who tend to be the most vocal about standing their ground and not falling prey to the government and the corporations. The same applies for farmland in South Africa. And so now what you've been hearing about over the past 2 years is how they're kicking these white farmers off these lands that are ancestral African lands, and giving them back to black people. So there's a lot of people upset about this, white people, upset about the fact that these white Dutch farmers are being kicked off these lands. But it only makes sense because all of that was taken through apartheid. The only reason why those white farmers have those lands is because of apartheid. They didn't just show up and talk to and ask to buy his land. No, they fucking pushed these people, the Xhosa people, the Zulu people, off these lands. And now they have to give it up. And now they butthurt about this because their grandfather or their father got this land for free. See? So it was a land grab, just like in Oklahoma, but in Africa through the Dutch and Germans.
Look, here's the point I want to point out, that whenever a black person gets a subsidy, it's called a handout. Whenever white people get a subsidy,
Other way. When the white people get it, it's a subsidy. When the black person gets it, it's a handout.
Yeah. Here's my point. White people get free shit all the time. That's why they came to America in the first place. Where they were living was oppressive, so they came to America, got a bunch of free shit because they wanted you here. Black folks were brought over here to be the capital and build this shit. So you got to understand that white people get free shit all the time. Foreigners get free shit all the time. How come it's so hard for a black person to get something?
You mean like corporate welfare? Like corporate welfare?
People don't understand how corporate welfare works. They give these companies free land. But how about this? The biggest demographic on welfare are single white males. Then after that, it's corporations. Black folks, we barely get anything. They use, because the term welfare for the ADC check you get, they stamp that name on it. But everybody gets welfare. And the reason these people came to this country from Italy, from Germany, because they were being given free shit. That's why they came here. So when you find out that in Africa they were given land to white folks because Afrikaners and all this other stuff and these Dutch. And so now they want to give it back to the original people. You have a problem with it? Remember, even Trump was saying like he would support the South African farmers if need be. Remember that shit?
Mm-hmm.
That's what he was talking about. See, you can. Racism is so subtle that on the same token, I'm not a Trump fan, but when Trump was calling the COVID the Chinese flu, oh, you can't say that. That's racist. But what's the new form of the COVID that everybody's talking about? The South African variant. Now, how come you can say South African variant, but you can't say Chinese? Because Chinese got a bunch of money, or the Spanish flu. See, that's crazy that you got swine flu. I guess the swines ain't got no coalition. I guess you got the swine flu, you got the Spanish flu. But when you said Chinese flu, whoa, slow down. That's racist. No, what it is, China got a bunch of money and you want their support and you don't want to piss the motherfuckers off. But if you want to see that the South African variant, well, apparently South Africa ain't got no money and got a bunch of niggas down there, so we can say South African variant. What I'm trying to get you to understand, that's how subtle racism is. And the people that do it are really good at it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying all white folks are bad, but they all benefit from the shit. Now, I'm not saying all niggas are lazy, but we all hurt from when that shit gets implemented till its full potential. I'm just trying to get you guys to recognize that the reason people are asking for reparations is they're not asking for a handout. We're asking for what you've done for everybody else. Native Americans get money. That's why it's crazy when you see black folks getting checks from this Native American land. I'm like, how'd you pull it off? Like that means they can prove it. Going back to those DOS rolls and all the DAWS rolls, excuse me, and it's showing that you were part of this tribe and that tribe. It takes an act of Congress for you to get any kind of Native American money. So when you see a brother or sister getting paid to get that check, I'm proud of them. What I'm saying is your land should be working for you. You always hear these people talk passive income. That's passive income. When you got the mineral rights to your land and you're getting paid and you ain't got to work for it, that's what white folks have been doing the entire time. They're getting paid without physical work. Elon Musk, I work 16 hours a day. Motherfucker, you ain't turned a wrench. You know what I'm saying? Bill Gates, I'm on the board. Yeah, white folks have a bunch of different jobs, but none of them are labor. They're not doing any physical labor, and their idea is figuring out how to fuck you out your money. So, and out your land too, excuse me. So yeah, man, pay attention to that shit. That's all I'm trying to say.
Okay, so here's the deal. You're focusing on the wrong thing if you are not buying land or maintaining the property that you have.
Yes.
This is the thing that everybody, young and old, need to understand, but especially young people, because there's so much new money that's being generated now by people who are internet, social media rich. And in Atlanta, I see a lot of it. In LA, I see a lot of that money. I see a lot of it. I see these people out all the time, flossing extra hard, flexing extra hard. And I see them buying this flashy shit, but they're not talking money, though. They're talking waste. Waste matter comes out of their mouth, not wealth. They speak about how they waste their money. They don't speak about how they build their money. Buying Bitcoin and blockchain currency, cool, man, cool. If you can make money off that shit, go for it. Dogecoin and all a bonfire and all this new shit is fine. Go for it. But what I'm telling you is invest that shit into something concrete, into something tangible. And my father used to tell me, he said, son, they're not making more land. You better get you some. And what he was telling me is that this fight is a long fight. It is old. It is older than this country. The fight to maintain your space on this spinning rock, in this country, on this wherever you go in the world, is always going to be something that you have to use your mental acuity for. Because really, if you talk to people, you can ask them a question. And you can ask them, do you own or do you rent? And that's going to tell you all about the person right there. That's going to tell you, hold on, that's going to tell you whether or not those people understand the value of owning soil, real estate, property.
Look, I don't know about that because you got to remember some people were cheated, but I think the deepest thing, like your dad always dropped jewels, but I think one of the things you just said when you talk about Atlanta, if you would, you need to understand nigga speak and business talk. Nigga speak talks about diamonds. Business talk talks about gold. Diamonds don't appreciate. Gold appreciates. So you see a little thing. I'm diamond up. I'm crusted. I'm iced out. Iced out means that chain will depreciate the second you get it. But if you talk about, hey, I got 28, 24 carats right here. This, and this. That's gold. Gold has went up in value. It keeps going up in value. Do you see the difference? Iced out chain. Yeah, you spent some money initially, but it depreciates. Gold, whatever you spent, it's going to appreciate.
Take those rocks out of that chain, smelt it down into some coins, and fucking trade it. You know what I'm saying?
Save
for something. No. Trade it and get some fucking real estate. Okay, because then no. Because that real estate. Now, see, here's where we're gonna go head to head. Because that real estate, you can take. Let's say you make about $3,000 off of that chain that you have like smelted into gold. You can take those ounces of gold and buy real estate. You can take that and you can build a house on there, or if there's a house on there, you can rent it out and it's going to make money for you faster than that gold will. Now, take that money and turn around and buy more gold. Diversify for sure. Have gold and real estate.
Gold and land are real money.
Together, yes.
I'm just those two things are real money. They will transcend shit. All this other stuff, it makes you feel good. I think the lesson that when you learn from a kid how to purchase property, when you buy some shoes, when you buy a shirt, you have it. But the lesson stops there with a lot of black folks. As your kid gets older, they should acquire stuff that will start working for them. That's the lesson that you should be teaching your children. That everything you buy is an investment. Now, is it an investment as in pleasure or investment as it's going to pay a dividend later on? And that's what you got to understand, and that you need to be teaching your kids. Like, okay, you bought your first bike. What did you do with your first bike, my brother? You got a paper route. That bike was transportation for you to make money for your family.
I made money with that piece.
Yeah, but do you see the difference? That's an investment. Now, when you buy some shoes, now you might buy them shoes to walk to work, but you might also buy them shoes because you like the way they look. And then you put them aside. You're not. There's no. They're not generating any money. That bike that bike was a vehicle for you to get to work to generate money and for you to deliver your papers. Do you see the difference in investments? And that's what you should be teaching your kid. And as they get older, it gets bigger and bigger. And then at some point, they should venture off on their own and create their own wealth and investments. The problem, what's going on right now, is that we just consume. Niggas are consumers, but that's by design. When you realize the land was taken and all this shit was done on purpose, their farmers were fucked over, then you realize that all your aspirations of becoming a businessman was shit on. Why do you think they uplift entertainers and not uplift black businessmen or black businesswomen? That's on purpose. So you got to understand that when you realize that this mind fuck is on purpose and that's not by accident, then you understand that, okay, yeah. You can't depend on your oppressor to free you. That's some bullshit. I'm sorry. Well, go ahead, my brother.
In closing, I want to say that shift your focus from things that do not return money to you to equity, to things that build money for you. You want to put your money into things that, listen, I understand you want to look good. Okay, but that should be a small part of your expenditures. Because if you look at your money that you make as a pie graph, and if you have, say, 20% of that you're going to spend on looking good, okay, because that 20% that you spend on looking good actually goes into your maintenance and like how you present yourself as a business person. And your part of your business could be your brand online, and how there's people online, companies that will have you that will sponsor you, and you can make money through them. That's cool. But even still, in that scenario, the money that's made from that situation, from this Instagram money, from this Bitcoin money, that money that you spend on depreciating assets or things that don't make money should be a small chunk of that pie.
Yes.
And then the rest of that pie should be the money that you're investing. The money that you're investing. And then a small portion of that should be your expenditures for your existence, meaning your mortgage and insurance and healthcare and all those things. That should be another small portion of the pie. But the largest portion of that pie should be the money that's being invested to grow your wealth. Because when you apply that mentality, you will always have a cushion to prevent you from touching and brushing up against hard times.
Look, my brother just said some deep shit. So let me do a summation. Redlining is bad, unacceptable racism. Greenlining is bad, acceptable racism. It's all bad. So don't get mixed up thinking that because somebody is giving you a little something that they really care about you. So remember, redlining bad, greenlining bad too.
That's right. They're both bad. So again, but you also need to dig into the history of property ownership in this country, because that is the true power. Because those
it's real money. It's real wealth.
Are the physical lines in the sand that are drawn to show, hey, I am here. I am right here. This is my spot. We holding it down right here. My people, my folks.
Our people use guns to keep their property safe.
That's right.
So don't be afraid of that. They said that, hey, that coalition in Langston, we had Winchester rifles. We keep our land. If y'all don't, black folks talk gun control, you stupid as fuck. Stop it.
That's right. That's right. Listen, if you got land, if you got a house, okay, if you have a house in your family, don't sell it. Hold on to it. My father always used to say, get some land because they're not making more of it. He's like, keep this house. Keep this house because it's power. It's something that you can keep for generations and generations, because it is also a place for everybody to come and gather. When somebody needs a place to stay, they can come and stay there temporarily.
Oh, hold it. Damn it. We're going to run over it. It don't matter. We ain't got no sponsors. Yeah, we ain't got no sponsors, nigga. We said we want. Look, I recently bought a house, and one of the things we want to talk, the reason this episode was so important, but we kind of forgot because there's so much shit to unpack, is that I had to jump through a shitload of hoops to get my house. First time I bought a house was over 20 years ago. And I went to the signing. Dude, I didn't do none of this shit. I verified my job. I gave him a couple of paperwork. I showed up the day for the signing, and it was a bunch of grant money. So they ended up giving me $1,200. And then the guy also owed me money for because I bought a duplex, and he owed me money from the person's rent. And so I walked out with like $1,600. This time I'm buying a house, I had to keep giving paperwork. And it's really frustrating because me and my wife have friends that keep talking about buying houses. They're like, hey, it's really hard to save up that money. It's really hard to do this.
No, but the crazy part is, like, the second house is supposed to be easier than the first house.
Oh, hell, the fucks, no. Now, I get it. Hold on. There's a couple layers here. What me and Roscoe were talking about, are white people going through the same shit? Because you can't tell me that when they saw my last name and saw where I moved from. So is this racism?
Okay.
Did I get racistized?
Right. Stop. You moved from the north side, which is black, to way out west. Okay. Way out west. Okay. Into a white neighborhood. And so you just brought up something right there. So, and I asked you this question off the air, and I was wondering, do they put black people through
a different rigmarole,
strenuous rigors regarding the paperwork and the verification process and all the rules when it comes to buying a home compared to a white person? And the answer is yes.
See, the conversation we had off the air, we try to have it on the air, but like I said, there's so much shit to unpack. So what I'm saying is, are you telling, I got all these black friends trying to buy a house now, like I said, and I feel bad because whenever people told me what they were going through, because like I said, I had my house for over 20 years. So when people would tell me what they're going through, I'm like, nigga, y'all tripping. I'm like, y'all making up shit. Or because I became an uppity nigga. I became that successful black person that you niggas didn't work as hard as me. No, when I
shame on a nigga.
Shame on a nigga who tried to make fun of a nigga. So when I realized that, damn, so I started sending people to my guy, to my mortgage guy, the guy that helped me, because the person I brought my first house with is the person I bought this house with. And because I'm sending people their way, and because of their other experiences, people ain't finishing the process. They're literally like, hey, man, they get burned out from having it. Hey, I need a picture from the third grade. I need a phone bill from this. And black folks are getting tired. My mom is going through it right now, refinancing. So you cannot tell me that all these white people are going through the same thing. They're not, because I got white friends buying houses, right? I got white friends building houses right now. And they're like, yeah, I didn't go. They're not going through all the steps. So you must recognize racism when you see it, and we confront it. Don't run away from it. Confront it and kick its ass. You need property to have real wealth in this world. So don't get discouraged. Now, here's the problem. I have a sister, and I got her hired at my company. Now, my sister's making more than me. She's balling, and she bought her house, and she didn't go through all this shit. Now, she bought her house maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that, and she didn't go through all this shit. Now, I get it. Now, here's how people want to explain it. There's a thing called rampant speculation. Basically, what that means, they gave a bunch of people houses that couldn't afford them, and they would make payments for about a year, then they would foreclose on it. So I get all that rampant speculation. But when it comes to the FHA and all these other entities that we described in this podcast, they're helping white people get houses much easier than they are for black folks. And people of color having to bust their ass and work a lot harder and put more money down and have more credentials to get the exact same result. That is racism. Why I'm in a race and you got a head start? That's not fair. So I get life ain't fair. Life ain't meant to be fair. But what I'm trying to tell you is this is some obvious racist shit. Beware of it. And we need to start opening our own black businesses, our own black banks. You got what's that Green Tree with Big Killer Mike. You got people trying to do this shit. We need to support our own so we can build and not have to go through the white power structure just to get a couple scraps.
All right. So to wrap it up, I'm going to say it is important that young people start investing their money into real estate.
Early.
And they need to invest in owning a home, not buying a shitty house and living in some high-rise condo in a white neighborhood. Buy a house and live in a house, okay, so that you understand what's really happening, okay? But what I'm going to say to close this down is that there is redlining, and that's keeping you out of a neighborhood. And then there's greenlining, which is gentrification.
It's taking that neighborhood
from you. So you have to understand that neither one of these are good for you. And then you also got to watch out for the YIMBYs. The YIMBYs stand for Yes in My Backyard. And these are the sellout motherfuckers that welcome these real estate developers to come in and gentrify their neighborhoods. And these people, they are agents in the army of Janus. Janus is a two-faced Roman god, all right? Mm-hmm. So understand that YIMBY motherfuckers will sell you out to these real estate developers for this green line gentrification. And by planting their Starbucks flag in the neighborhood, you know that they are coming. So, again, if you are in a neighborhood, you're in a black neighborhood, and you see black people or white people starting to buy shit up, you need to buy some of those houses in that neighborhood, okay? Because that
black
property
folks could open a franchise too. Explore that shit. I want to open a Little Caesars. That's the cheapest franchise out there. How come we ain't opening those? Because we're told that we can't, or are we told that behavior is white?
No, it's not because we're told that we can't. We're told that we should focus on the gifts that we have, and we should run that football, or we should sing that song, or you should get out there and dance on that stage. Hey man, all that's cool, but the money that you make from that, don't go and buy the biggest house in the whitest neighborhood. Go buy 5 houses in the shittiest black neighborhood you can find. That's what you do.
Make it. What we're saying is make that neighborhood better. Your presence, being there, fixes all the shit that's wrong with it. You being there makes a big difference.
That's right. So buy some land, become part of the process to actually be real change and not some whimsical poster on a fucking wall. We out. Peace.
Holla back.